Just over a week ago, the Russian economy seemed to be in its worst shape in years. Low oil prices and sanctions were starving the Russian economy of critical energy revenues, which the Kremlin has relied on to fund its war in Ukraine. And in the last 2 weeks of February, Russian territorial gains actually went negative. However, the war in Iran has seemingly changed all of this. The Kremlin has enjoyed a sudden reversal of its fortunes, as the Strait of Hormuz has essentially been closed, and oil and gas production across the Middle East has been severely disrupted. This has sent global energy prices surging, with oil prices soaring over $100 a barrel on Monday for the first time since 2022. Meanwhile, astonishingly, the US has suggested it may lift sanctions on Russian oil to cushion the blow of the war on the global oil market, whilst the Kremlin, which has openly said it supports Iran and has reportedly even helped Iran target US troops, has thus far received basically no criticism from the Trump administration. So in this video, we're going to take a look at why, as things currently stand, Putin looks to be emerging as perhaps the single biggest winner from the war in Iran. Trump was the world's most influential person on our recent ranking. So in the latest edition of our magazine Too Long, we explain how he retained his top place position, and why that strong result might actually be based on increasingly shaky foundations, as he grapples with unpopularity and divisions within his base. That's just one of 72 pages in the magazine, because as always, there's more to Too Long than you'd expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. After the war in Iran began last weekend, and amid Iranian attacks on oil tankers, shipping in the Strait of Hormuz effectively ground to a halt. Soon after Iranian drones and missile attacks on regional energy infrastructure, Saudi Aramco halted operations in its largest oil refinery, and Qatar shut down gas production. Unsurprisingly, this sent energy prices across the world soaring. Brent crude futures, the international benchmark for global oil prices, climbed nearly 10% to a 13-month high of just over $80 a barrel. After this jump, oil prices continued their upward trajectory when Trump said the war in Iran could last longer than the initially projected 4 to 5 weeks. Then, over the weekend, with strikes across the region intensifying and other oil exporters like Kuwait announcing they'll cut production further, oil prices went over $100 per barrel for the first time since 2022, when Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine, and at one point reached an eye-watering $119 a barrel. Now, economically speaking, this is great news for Russia, and couldn't come at a better time for the Kremlin. For context, Russia's war effort has been in serious trouble lately. In the last year, Russia has been struggling to reap in profits from its energy industry, its main source of foreign currency, which is in turn used to finance its war in Ukraine. This is largely because energy prices were trending downwards for most of the past year or so, but also a consequence of a strong ruble, which skyrocketed by 45% against the US dollar last year, meaning that Moscow is getting less in its own currency for each dollar it earns from its exports. Recent US-imposed sanctions on Russia's top producers Rosneft and Lukoil last October have also led to a higher discount on Russian oil exports, pushing down the Kremlin's revenues further. This has left its domestic oil companies struggling, with the smaller and mid-sized companies even facing bankruptcy, and put a strain on the state budget, with the deficit widening sharply last year. However, this new oil price spike will give Russia the fiscal boost it so desperately needs. Not only are high prices good news in and of themselves for the Kremlin, as the Strait of Hormuz faces major disruption, big oil importers such as China and India will presumably look to Russia to provide even more crude supplies. This is why the discount between Russia and non-Russian oil has narrowed in the past week, and there have even been reports in recent days that, at Indian ports, Russia is able to sell its oil at a premium. In other words, because Russia is more reliable than Middle East oil right now, Russia can charge higher prices than other producers. To top it all off, the US has suggested it could loosen sanctions on Russia in an attempt to bring down global oil prices, despite the fact that loosening sanctions won't really increase global supply. Russia is still exporting, after all, and will mainly just help Russia. On Friday, for instance, in an astonishing U-turn, the US government announced it would temporarily ease sanctions to allow India to buy Russian oil, announcing a 30-day waiver. For context, last year India was the largest buyer of seaborne Russian oil, buying around 1.7 million barrels per day of Russian crude, roughly half of Russia's total seaborne exports. This January, however, under pressure from the US to cut purchases, Indian imports fell to about 1.1 million barrels per day, even though Russia sharply increased its discount, with cargoes apparently priced as low as $25 per barrel, and was expected to continue declining throughout the year as it boosted imports from elsewhere, including the Middle East. However, after the war began, Indian refineries and oil ministry officials sought to restart Russian oil shipments, considering that there's around 9.5 million barrels of it idly sitting in Asian waters, and the US apparently acquiesced. The White House has since signalled it could go further, apparently concerned about the threat to global oil supply. As oil demand surges across the world, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent even went further and told Fox Business that the US could move to unsanction other Russian oil. It's not just a windfall of oil profits that the Kremlin is set to benefit from. Following Iranian attacks on Qatar's huge state-owned gas company, Qatar Energy, which also accounts for nearly 20% of the global LNG trade, the gas giant halted production of liquid natural gas. This sent European gas prices skyrocketing. The benchmark gas prices traded on the Dutch TTF hub rose by nearly 40% last Monday and nearly 50% the following day. Some estimates suggest that if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed for a month, European gas prices could rise to 130%, similar to what we saw during the 2022 energy crisis. With Qatari supplies down, a number of European politicians, including Norway's energy minister, have even suggested the EU might have to rethink its upcoming blanket ban on Russian gas, especially if the war in Iran continues. Emboldened by this change of events, Putin has turned the tables, and is now threatening to cut off Russian gas to Europe and redirect supplies to other new markets. All in all, with the West's strategic focus diverted and the Kremlin set to gain a windfall revenue from oil and gas profits, Putin's strategy of indefinitely prolonging peace talks without making concessions will likely continue, and it looks like Trump has essentially bailed him out of a genuinely tough spot. Now, if you'll want to binge watch our videos, or in fact any news videos recently, it's very understandable that you might feel as though the world isn't super safe right now. You're probably doing all you can to at least feel in control of your online security. You're adding an extra 1 or capital letter into your passwords. But is that always enough? Well, luckily our sponsor this week, NordVPN, takes your safety seriously and expertly works to protect all of your data online. It's an unfortunate reality that online scams and phishing attacks are on the rise right now. With us getting bombarded by emails from our banks, social media accounts, and constant newsletters we forgot we even signed up to, it's easier than ever to click the wrong thing. But with NordVPN's certified anti-phishing tool, you don't have to worry about your online safety being compromised, as their Threat Protection Pro feature detects at least 85% of phishing websites, blocking millions of scams every single month. Even if one slipped through and you did reach a suspicious website, NordVPN's data encryption tools would protect against a number of other attacks like malicious man-in-the-middle data breaches and intense DDoS attacks. And don't worry, if you're worried about past sensitive information being compromised, NordVPN's dark web monitoring is always scanning for your details and passwords, and can actively notify you before you even notice. Their super handy NordPass feature will even upgrade those old passwords for you and keep them all organised and safe in one place. NordVPN isn't just the fastest VPN on the planet, it's a much needed shield to protect you from all those threats online. So, if cybersecurity is as important to you as it is to us, sign up to NordVPN today. Simply click the link in the description or go to nordvpn.com/TLDR, and not only will you get a massive discount, but you also get 4 extra months totally free. There's no better time to protect yourself. So once again, that's nordvpn.com/TLDR, and it's completely risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee.